Yeah, he's been working with Youth Unlimited since 1981, and if you saw the big truck outside, worth going in and having a look. That's quite the unit you've got there. They're also going to be providing lunch after this, and I'd like to encourage you to come to that and also listen. He's going to share a bit about his ministry before he really revs it up and starts preaching here. So I'm going to pray for you.
Perfect. Thank you.
Father, thank you for Barry. Just thank you for his ministry, for the work they're doing, hands-on work. And I just pray, Father, that you'd bless them and him and his work and the people he works with. Also, thank you that you'll be with him this morning, and ask you just to give him the words that he should speak. In Jesus' name, amen.
Okay, thank you, George. Get the papers out here. Okay, thank you, George, for the introduction. Does this sound all right? It's very echoey to me. You notice the truck coming in. It's hard not to notice. So we're going to talk a little more about that later. And Ken is here. Where's Ken? Is he in the building? Maybe he's outside by the truck. Anyway, he's our area director for Chilliwack. So my boss when I'm working in Chilliwack, and he's also the driver of the truck. And he'll be around after, so you can do tours and go check it out because it's worth seeing. It's a one-of-a-kind vehicle. I'm going to give you a brief update on Youth Unlimited Ministries that I'm involved in, and then with your help, we'll be looking in some verses at the end of the second chapter of Acts, which, if you're as old as me, sounds like a music group from the 70s, and it was really good. I don't preach very often, so you have to forgive me if I'm a bit nervous, and plus my mom is here today, and I think this is the first time she's ever heard me preach, so that makes me even more nervous, but it's nice to have her with us. And some of my kids are here too, which is really good. First, I want to clear up any confusion about the Youth Unlimited and Youth for Christ names, because some people might wonder, well, what's going on? Youth Unlimited is still part of Youth for Christ, International Youth for Christ, Greater Vancouver Youth for Christ. It's the name that we use kind of for our ministries. We used to have Campus Life and Youth Guidance. They just became kind of confusing names and didn't really encompass what we did. And so we came up with the idea of using Youth Unlimited because it's unlimited. We can do all kinds of things under that name. And that's the name that we started using since about the late 1980s into the early 90s. That's when we started. But Youth for Christ itself, does anyone know when Youth for Christ started? Anyone got a guess? Not my family, they should know, but anyone else? It was in 1944. It was right at the end of the First World War. They realized a lot of troops were coming back and coming into big cities. They were from maybe Missouri or wherever, and they'd end up in Chicago or New York because that's where the transports would bring them. And then all these people are wandering around the streets with not much to do. And some church guys decided, hey, pastors and stuff, they thought, we should start doing some rallies and bring these young people together and give them some teaching about who Jesus is. And Youth for Christ was founded that way and became a movement across North America and then around the world. Does anyone know who the first hired Youth for Christ staff was? No. I wasn't quite at the very beginning. It's somebody that you all know, though. Billy Graham was actually the first man hired. Torrey Johnson was the guy that kind of founded Youth for Christ, but he had his own church and was ever ministries. And they thought, we need someone that can work full-time doing this and taking it to rallies and go speak all around the world in North America. And Billy Graham was the first guy hired to do that. I mean, eventually he went on to his own evangelistic association, but he was our first staff. My connection to Youth for Christ actually predates me. My mom and my dad, well, my dad was, he sang in the Youth for Christ choir in Vancouver and in a traveling quartet. He was all over BC and Saskatchewan, or not Saskatchewan, Washington State, different places singing as part of a quartet. And then one night after a Youth for Christ rally in Vancouver, my dad walked out and my mom happened to walk out at the same time. They went to the same church, but they didn't really hang out together, and they bumped into each other on the street outside of a Youth for Christ rally and went on their first date. And that led to our family, yeah. And my mom is still with us. My dad passed away in 2006, but it's in my blood, I guess, to be a part of Youth for Christ. I remember going as a young child to Youth for Christ rallies that were still going on then in Vancouver, and my parents and our whole kid, my brothers and I would all go, and so I kind of knew the roots of YFC. Then many years later, I started volunteering in Vancouver with Youth for Christ. They started a new program called Youth Guidance to work with disadvantaged young people. That's what God's call in my heart was, to work with kids like that. And when I found an agency that did it, I thought, I got to join them. And eventually I came on staff in 1981 and worked in East Vancouver for many years, moved to Abbotsford, did a couple years there, moved to Mission, and started Youth for Christ work in Mission that's been going since 1993. And then 6 years ago when we moved to Chilliwack, I got more involved here, and now I do kind of a bit of both, a bit of Mission, a bit of Chilliwack. And just, this is an announcement too about retirement. In September, I'm going to go to 2 days a week, 1 day in Mission, 1 day in Chilliwack, and start working towards retiring. It's not easy when you do stuff that you really love doing, but that's my plan. Okay. Was anyone involved in YFC in the past? Any rallies? Anyone else that was? There used to be a car club even in Chilliwack, a Youth for Christ car club, and they had parades and all kinds of stuff. I'm looking into history and going, wow, I didn't know that. So it's been around a long time, done a lot of things, and had a lot of a positive impact in people's lives, and we hope to continue doing that. Just on the financial side, and I don't want to belabor this, but I've been a faith missionary for almost 44 years. Actually, I started fundraising 44 years ago now. I have donors that have supported me monthly for 44 years. Blows my mind that there's people that have done that. But that's been something that's been a blessing to me, and something hopefully has been a blessing to them, to see how their funding this ministry makes a difference in young people's lives. I still, as I cut my hours back, that's going to help with the fundraising part, but I still probably need to raise a little more just to keep my salary coming in, and the expenses. I have to cover expenses when I take someone out for a coffee or a lunch or whatever, any of that stuff. We raise all of that as staff. We do have a bit of grant funding that's coming in now in the last few years, which has really helped cover some of those expenses, but it's just part of what we do, and part of my life up to this point has been involved in that. So my goal is to make it to December of next year, which would be 45 years I would complete as a youth worker. I figure that's a pretty good thing to target. I may not get there, but that's my plan. So I want to update you quickly on some of the things that we're doing. So we'll go to the next slide. The Mission Youth House, you've probably heard about it. I've talked about it before. It's a home in Mission. It's a shared resource between a bunch of agencies, not just Youth for Christ, but we're able to do ministry at it, even though really it's a community-based resource. They allow us, and they actually want us to do ministry there, so it's pretty good. We have, I think, 4 staff now, 5 staff working out of there, part-time, each of us. But we work with a lot of young people that are homeless, drug addicts, vulnerable kids that are facing all kinds of challenges. And every day is different that we're there. But we are able to provide them resources that they need, like they can have showers, they can do their laundry, get new clothes, like we have a whole clothes room that they can go shopping in if they need stuff. Get food, we feed them, we make meals, they make meals. We work together and we treat it like it's their house. And it's become a really meaningful place. It's been 10 years we've had this operating. And it's been a meaningful place in a lot of young people's lives. Ryan is here today. He's one of the kids that I met there many years ago and is now living out in Chilliwack. But you can ask him later if you have a chance, and he'll tell you how much my house makes a difference in the lives of young people that are living in a tent in the bush somewhere and have nowhere to really get cleaned up even or look after themselves. So that's one of the places. I want to tell you a real quick story from that. This is a number of years ago. A young woman was coming to the youth house. She was 23 years old. She was a street person. She lived on the street. She was a prostitute. She was an addict. Like, she didn't have a whole lot of anything going for her. It was a pretty rough life. And she was at the youth house one day sleeping, because we let them sleep on the couch if they need a rest. And the phone rang, woke her up, and she said, and I said, it's okay, it's just a phone. She goes back to sleep. A couple hours later when she woke up, she said, Barry, something woke me up. And I said, yeah, the phone rang, and she said, but I went back to sleep. And I said, of course, And then she said, she said these words, and I'll never forget exactly how she said it. She said, "This is the first only safe place I've ever been in my life." And I'm thinking, that shouldn't be happening to young people in our communities. 23-year-old girl that has never really felt safe. And that's what my house is for, a place where kids that really need it can come and get that kind of support. So I'm very thankful to be a part of that and to have been able to be a part of that over the years. The truck, that's a ministry that we're doing here in Chilliwack on Thursday nights at Stewart Park, which is near Bernard Elementary School. We park it there. We have a whole team of volunteers that come out, including John and Madeline, who have strong connections in this church. And they're amazing. They do great work with these young people. But we get somewhere between 30 and 50 kids will show up on a given Thursday night, and we feed them. We give them, snacks and food. We play games out in the field or in the truck. There's all kinds of board games and stuff. We just sit and talk and listen and hear their stories, and we get a chance to love them. And we have one of our volunteers who just loves telling Bible stories, and she's out in the field with a whole pile of kids around her. She's telling them Bible stories and asking them questions. And so we just find ways to get ministry done with the kids that show up at the truck. So that's one of the things. The other thing I do in Chilliwack is I'm doing a lot of carving in the schools. There's the sign. In Slessy, Cultus, and Watson School. And the reasons, my dad was a wood carver. I inherited a lot of his carving tools, so that was kind of cool, and I learned a bit from him. And then I just like doing art and like doing carving. And the other thing is my wife works in Cultus School, and she just likes to bring me in and have me work with kids in her school, which is great. I love doing it, but it's an open door that I can just go in and love on some kids. And some of the kids at Cultus, they're from the Sawali band out there, and they don't have a carver in their band. And I'm teaching some of their little kids how to carve, and they're going, we want to keep doing this. So I'm hoping that carvers will evolve and be able to continue their art and culture in their band, because I've been able to contribute a little bit that way. The last thing I want to update you about Youth Unlimited is the YU Night Out. It's coming again in November. The youth group from here and Pastor Darren came and slept out, attempted to sleep out last year on the hard ground. It's an interesting night. It doesn't, you can be old and still do it. I'm old and I do it, so there's no excuses. But it's not a comfortable night's sleep. It's one that just teaches you how uncomfortable it can be and how harsh it can be to have to live that way. And it gives us more compassion for young people that are dealing with those kinds of challenges. So if anyone's interested, there's information on the back table about all of this stuff. You can check it out later, or ask me questions, or ask Ken if you see him. Okay, we need to get into the message. And you're going to all help me. I'm not doing this by myself. So I'm going to give you opportunities to have input. The passage we're looking at is Acts 2. You can go to the next slide. Oh, there it is. Acts 2, 42 to 47. I was reading through Acts a while ago, and this passage really hit me as kind of a profound glimpse into what the early church looked like. And I think the more we can understand about what the early church looked like, the more we can maybe pattern what we do as church to sort of fit that pattern and suit what the body of Christ is supposed to look like. So let's read it together. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and to fellowship, the breaking of bread and to prayer. Everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And all the believers were together and had everything in common. They sold property and possessions to give to anyone who had need. And every day they continued to meet together in the temple courts. They broke bread in their homes and ate together with glad and sincere hearts, praising God and enjoying the favor of all the people. And the Lord added to their number daily those who were being saved. Now, Acts, like the book of Luke that we've just spent a number of years going through, was written by Luke to his friend Theophilus. So I think it would be fitting to ask, what did Luke want most honorable Theophilus to know? What did he want the people of the day to know? And what did he want us to learn from this passage? Darren's not here, but hopefully he's watching or something, and he'll get the reference. A bit of context. Obviously, this is I didn't start at the beginning of the passage, or we would be reading all of Peter's sermon. But Peter was preaching in the community, in the streets of Jerusalem, not long after Jesus had ascended. And he was telling people about what Jesus had done and his death and resurrection and who he was. And people were becoming followers in droves, like by the thousands. And the church was new. They didn't have Bibles to read, like these not New Testaments. They didn't have all the letters that were written to the churches, all that stuff. It just didn't exist yet. So they needed to learn verbally, basically, what was going on. And it really does kind of give us a quick look at what the church started out as. And I think there's sort of 6 major things we're going to look at. Now, I know that's 3 more than you're supposed to have in a sermon, but we're going to try to go through them quickly. But the 6 things are, and then we're going to look at those 6 things through 3 different lenses, too. So it's going to get complicated, but we're going to get through there. The 3 things, or the 6 things are teaching, the apostles' teaching, fellowship and eating. I've combined 2 things. Prayer, sharing, worship, and mission. So we're going to start right off on teaching. And what I want to do is I'll give you a little intro, and then I want you to tell me what teaching looks like here at River of Life. How does teaching happen? So start thinking. The church was brand new. Like I said, the New Testament hadn't been written. They had to have information given to them verbally. At Youth Unlimited, we don't give weekly sermons. We're not an organized church-like structure. But we do take time to teach kids as much as we can when we have opportunity. On the truck, that we have that one volunteer that does Bible teaching every week, and the rest of us contribute in that area when we can. Often on one-to-ones with young people, we'll present the gospel. At the youth house, we always do the Christmas story and the Easter story the way they are, and every year there's young people that have never heard it before. They go, "What? That's what Christmas is really about?" They have no idea. So it's an opportunity to really help young people understand what the real message is and what the gospel is about. So what about here at River of Life? How does teaching happen? This is your turn. What's that? Life, yeah. The life groups that meet. What else? Youth group, yeah. Sermons, sure. Anything else? What about the worship songs and the hymns? Right? They teach theology and Scripture, and we don't think of that sometimes. And they're often the ones that stick with us. Right? You might be humming a hymn or a song a couple days later, and you're going, "Oh yeah, I was thinking of that." It just reminds us of what we're supposed to know. So there's lots of different ways that we can learn and teach each other. So it's good that we have these different things. The kids, what do they call it? Life kids, right? They're downstairs learning. Vacation Bible School happened a couple weeks ago. There was presentations of Scripture and teaching to those kids. So there's lots of things, and there's new ways that we can find too. I don't think we should ever limit it to that's the way we do it. Let's find new opportunities, new ways to share what we know. And what about in our own lives? How do we learn, or what happens teaching-wise in our own personal lives? Reading and studying the Bible, right? We can do a lot of our own research and reading. It helps build up what we know. And what else? Podcasts, listen to podcasts, or maybe watching movies, Christian movies that tell the stories. Like there's a new one coming about David and Goliath or something like that. I don't know. There's all this stuff that maybe help us understand the story better, give us different insight into it. Talking with other people, right? Going for coffee with people and just chatting. I love going for coffee. So if anyone wants to go for coffee, let me know. It's good just to talk and to iron sharpens iron, right? The more we can learn together, the more we can benefit each other too. Okay, we're going to move on. Fellowship and eating. That should be a high point. We're going to eat together today even. It's such a good thing that we have a fellowship and positive kind of community in churches. We need that. There are some churches that are being ripped apart and are having strife, and that it's so harsh, because then the community's watching that and going, what's going on? Those people are supposed to love each other and love everybody, and they can't even get along. So finding ways to be in good fellowship and to eat together, I think, are really good. At Youth Unlimited, at my house, we feed kids every day. Like we do a big meal on Wednesday night, a sit-down kind of dinner, but every day there's food going. A lot of what our staff and volunteers are involved in is either prepping or cleaning up or fixing food or getting food for kids. We give food for them to take home if they need, there's families that are, they're struggling. We'll just give them hampers and let them take food home and be able to look after themselves that way. So food becomes a real ministry tool in settings like that. And at the truck, too, we have a lineup of kids. When we get there, we stop and have kind of a little staff meeting, and the kids are lined up probably 30 deep, waiting to get at the snacks that they know they're, as soon as we say, yeah, then they're happy to get something to eat and to be able to be together in a good way like that. And then we play stuff like, we play games outside on the truck, all these ways of just building relationship, having fun, building connection to these kids. So what happens at River of Life for fellowship and food? What do you do? Or what do we do? What is it? Soup Sunday, yeah. That's a good one. I love Soup Sunday. What else? What's that? The Christmas dinner. That's a good one too. A great meal and a good time just to be together. Life groups usually have food and hangout time together, a chance to get to know other people. Right. Guess who's coming for dinner? That's it. That's a neat thing, right? It's a chance to just go and meet other people and be with somebody in their place or serve somebody else. Hospitality is such an important thing, right? And the more we can do that, the more, again, people outside the church, we don't often think of it that they're watching, but they're watching. And if they see stuff like that, really positive kind of connection and caring, that can make a difference. That can make them go, oh, no, why are they like that? So it's pretty good if they get that way. Okay, what about personally? What kinds of things do you do personally that are connected to fellowship and food? Going out for coffee, as I mentioned, that's a good thing. I got a few spots, but I'm always willing to learn new coffee spots if someone has them. What else? Having people over, right? Just being hospitable, inviting people over that you don't know or even people that you do know. Hang out with your friends and eat meals together, right? It all builds community and builds the body. So if we can find ways to do that, it's very positive. And special family meals and stuff, or Christmas, dinners or whatever, involve somebody else. Maybe you got an extra spot at the table. Bring somebody in that maybe doesn't have a big family to be a part of. Just share those kinds of meals and times with others. Okay, prayer. We're going to move on to prayer. What time do we got? We're doing all right. Okay, praying should obviously be an integral part of every church, and our prayers should include thanksgiving, repentance, petition, and probably other things. But it's important that we are a praying church. At my house, we say grace for our meals when we're having the sit-down meals anyways, but a lot of the prayers that happen at my house are on the fly. We're in the midst of a crisis. We've got something going on. We're going, oh, man, I don't know what to do. We do a lot of praying because it's like, God, you got to help us. You got to give us the right words. You got to give us the right way to calm the situation down or the right people to arrive to help or whatever. And so far, we've made it through 10 years without any kind of major injuries and we've had some scary moments, but we've always got through them. And I think it's important that we just remember to take that stuff to God and let him help us handle it. So we do that on the truck every week. We meet as a staff and we pray together, and we have prayer teams for my house and the truck that are praying in the background and supporting what we do. So prayer is really important, and we think it's an integral part, and obviously is an integral part of what we do at Youth for Christ. But what about here at River of Life? What happens prayer-wise? The prayer chain. That's really important, right? When something's going on, we can put it out fast to a lot of people. Life groups, always pray together too, yeah. At the front and the back, there's people here to pray every Sunday. The prayer team, is that what they call it? I should know. But, it's all these ways. And then just specific prayer for crisis situations like, the prayer chain, but maybe even gathering to pray for a certain situation. Prayer services could happen too, right? A specific time where we need to meet together and pray. about something that's going on or changes that are happening or whatever. What about daily or personal lives? What happens there with prayer? A prayer journal, yeah, doing a prayer journal. I'm not a very good journal person, but that's a really helpful thing for a lot of people. What else? Praying on the fly. It's a good thing to do. I mean, we're supposed to pray without ceasing, and sometimes it feels like that's what you got to do just to keep up, but it's good. And sometimes you just need to call a friend or something, or maybe they need you to call them and say, what's going on? How can we help? What can we pray about? God gives guidance and leading that way sometimes, that you just need to respond and be available for someone that needs someone to listen to them and to pray with them. So looking for those opportunities. Okay, sharing. I'm not going to suggest that we need to sell everything like they did in the passage. We're going to sell everything and just give to everybody else. I don't think we need to do that. But we do need to be good stewards of what God gives us, right? We need to be willing to share. We need to be willing to support others and help others when they're in a difficult time or whatever it is. And I think God, expects that of us, that we're good sharers. So at Youth Unlimited, we are the recipients of a lot of sharing, especially at the youth house. When people donate money, they donate food, they donate time, they donate clothing. Like every day that I've been at the youth house, someone has arrived with, here, we've got this for you. And it could be boxes of food or a bunch of used clothes or even new stuff that they've said, we just went and bought this because we think the kids need this, new socks, whatever. It's amazing. And more often than not, we don't even have to put word out that we need it. It arrives. And it's kind of, again, that God bit where he's just looking after stuff and knowing that you need this to get for these young people, and it arrives at the door when we need it most. Christmas time, we'll get 5 or 6 people a day bringing stuff. It's like sometimes we're going, whoa, we're overwhelmed. Like we got stuff stacking up because there's so much stuff coming in. But then we know in January, February, it's going to go out. So it's amazing how God provides and how sharing makes a difference. And I do want to tell one quick sharing story that I think was one of the most unusual sharing stories at the youth house that I've ever been a part of. But we had one young man arrive one day with a youth worker from community services, Mission Community Services, that's next door to us. And she said, this young guy really needs you to care for him. She says, I'm so glad you're open today because he needs to be here. And then she says, I got other meetings, I got to go. So I bring the young guy in, get him sat down, kind of get him some food and stuff. And then she says, can I speak to you? And I go back on the front deck and she goes, he's suicidal. Like he's talking about ending it all. And I can't stay with him, but can you just watch him? And I go, oh, for sure. Like we're on this. So I go back and I'm chatting with the young guy and I said, you haven't been here. It was in February, about probably 4 years ago or something. I said, you haven't been here since Christmas, have you? And he goes, no. I says, well, your Christmas present's upstairs. And he goes, what? And he said, yeah. I said, a company in Mission gave us money so we could buy Christmas presents for all of our youth. And so I said, I'm going to get your present. So I go upstairs, and we had these really nice backpacks that had you could plug them in, you could charge your phone off them, like it had battery in it, and it was full of everything, like chocolate and whatever else, all kinds of extra stuff, right? I bring it down to him, I give it to him, and he's going, that's for me? And I said, yeah, that's your Christmas present. We've been holding it for you till we saw you. And he goes, I had no way to charge my phone, and now I can charge my phone with my backpack. I go, perfect. So we plug in his backpack, plug in his phone. He says, I need to have a rest. He goes to sleep, and he's happy. And I'm going, that's a big change from how he came in, right? A few minutes later, another youth walked in, well, after as this young guy's waking up, and he says, I think I'm going to have one of my steaks, this new guy. And I'm going, okay. And a few days before that, he had brought a couple packages of big steaks in, and we're going, where did those come from? And he says, oh, my friend gave them to me. We're going, yeah, don't think so. But at that point, we can't really prove where they came from, and we didn't want to make a big scene. So they went into our freezer. Now this guy arrives, and he thinks it's time to have a steak. And he goes in, sees his buddy is there, and just waking up, he goes, do you want a steak? He goes, what? He goes, yeah. So I'll cook you a steak. He goes, okay. And it was one of the most amazing things, because here God used a stolen steak and fed a kid that needed to be loved that day. And the kid didn't need to know where the steak came from. and it didn't really even matter. It was just the fact that another young person was willing to share with a young guy that really needed someone to love them that day and to share with them. So sharing makes a big difference, right? It can change lives. It probably saved that young man's life that day. And he's still around. We see him now and then. He's doing okay. But he might not have been if we weren't there to just pass on things that others gave us that we could use to make a difference. Okay, not every sharing story is quite that weird, but what about here at the church? What kind of sharing happens? It's your turn again. Come on. Sharing Sundays. Yep, people get up and tell the stories, tell what's going on in their lives. That's really key. What else? Food drives. Yeah, when bringing food in, helping Ruth and Naomi's or Salvation Army or whatever else, right? They grow in a line of carrots for the Salvation Army or something. Those are all good things. It's kind of a real basic one that happens in church. Tithes and offerings, right? We're sharing some of what God's given us, giving it back, helping the church do the things that it does. Acts of service, yeah, volunteering. Right? Sort of special offerings for groups that need it. I called it casserole ministry. I don't know if but it'd be like the prayer chain, but somebody has had a crisis and it's like, we need to make food for them. I don't know what you call that here, but I think it happens, right? And it's so key, right? I know when we've been in hard situations and people have brought us food, we're going, oh, that makes such a big difference. You don't have to think, you don't have to prepare, you just can go warm something up and eat and be okay, right? Those are gifts that we can give each other. Work days at the church, right? People are bringing tractors and chainsaws and stuff's just arriving from everywhere. Like the last work day, I was like, where did all this equipment come from? But it makes a huge difference, right? The jobs get done way faster and people get to work together and they can offer that kind of service to the church. There's a lot of different ways that we can share, but they make a difference and they make the body work better together. And it's community building, right? It's a good fellowship time, too, to do those things. Excuse me. Okay, what about personally? What can we do personally to share what we have? They're making you work. Sure. You can get, buy groceries for somebody that's needing it, that maybe is a little short. That would be perfect. Give to the food bank. Yeah, volunteering at the truck. You can sign up at the back if you're interested. We always need more volunteers. We got great volunteers, but it's always good to have other people, right? They bring different skills, different abilities, different connection points with the kids. We have lots of people that bake for the truck. That's their gift. They just say, well, I can't be there, but I can make cookies or I can make... Kids love it, right? Homemade stuff like that. Maybe sometimes you need to share your home. Like maybe there's somebody that just needs a place to stay for a month or a couple days or whatever, and you open your home to them, or you share your vehicle. They got to move, and you go, well, I got a pickup truck. That's the one thing about having a pickup truck. People ask you to help them move, but that's okay. They need help, and you can be there and you can do that kind of stuff. So the ways that we can support each other and care for others makes a difference too, right? Both in people in the church and in our community, right? Maybe our neighbor needs help, and we can do that. Maybe we invite the neighbors over for a barbecue just because we want to let them know that we care about them and want to get to know them better. Whatever it is, there's ways that we can share. Okay, worship. We're going to get on through this. We're called to make a joyful noise unto the Lord, and worship isn't an option, right? It's really got to be a part of what we do as a body. So at Youth Unlimited, we spend time worshiping together as a staff, but we also look for opportunities to do it with the young people. And it's different because you get kids that don't have a church background that don't really know what even worship's about. It's a very unusual thing, and I'm going to try to tell a quick story again, but I like telling stories. Years ago, we did a labyrinth, a prayer labyrinth that was quite extensive, and it was like there was 6 stations that you went through that were kind of letting go of what was going on in your life, releasing what was happening, and then you met. We had a fountain going in a pool in the middle, and it was a place where you met Jesus in the middle. And there was rocks that you could write stuff on and drop them into this pool. And then there was 6 more stations that kind of were how to fill yourself up with what you needed to go back into the world, kind of with experience of Jesus. We're doing this with Mission Street kids, and you're kind of going, hey, how is this going to work? All of our volunteers went through it, and they're kind of going, okay, this is cool. Finally, some of the kids started doing it, and by the end of the evening, I think maybe a dozen of the youth had actually gone through this whole thing. And it was like really cool to watch them do it, because they're experiencing something that they've never experienced before. But the most amazing thing, and I'll never forget it, is at the very end, they all gathered around the pool in the middle. They went back to Jesus. And we're going, we didn't orchestrate that. That's not even how this thing's supposed to work. But it was like they found that they needed to go sit around in the middle where the representation of Jesus was, and just be there quietly and talking to each other. And it taught me a lesson that day, that Jesus can work in situations that we kind of go, that's probably not going to work. He still makes it work, and he finds ways to have young people that don't even really know him figure out how to start worshiping him. So I think we got to look for opportunities like that. Okay, what about here? How does worship work in the River of Life? Sunday mornings. There's a worship team that's up here. Was up here a few minutes ago. We'll come back as quick as we get done. So yeah, that's one thing. Well, what other things? Youth group, there's worship nights, right? Or worship going on there. What other things? Yeah, there's a Elam service, sometimes the joint service with the Mennonite Brethren Church. That's more of just a focused worship night. There's lots of other ways worship happens. It doesn't have to be through music, right? There's art and drama and poetry readings and whatever. There's lots of different ways that we can find to worship God. And I think the more we try different things, the more we maybe gain more experience and even find new ways that really connect us to God through worship. What about personally? How do you worship God individually? None of you sing in your car? Come on. With music. You might be singing, or in the shower, or wherever you're singing, right? There's times when it's just like, whoa, I got this song in my head, and you just kind of start saying it to yourself. And if you're in the car by yourself, it's good, So there's times that worship just happens that way. Walking out in the wilderness. I love going for walks in the woods, right? But I find them can be very worshipful, right? Because you're just in God's creation and you're just enjoying what he's provided for us, and you're finding a real sense of connection. So I think we need to look at ways to expand our worship parameters and just let it open up and try new things. Serving others is a form of worship, right? Going to Ruth and Naomi's and serving dinner. That's a worship action in God's mind. He's going, that's what it says in the Bible, right? And the worship I'm looking for is caring for the widows and the orphans, right? That's telling God that we care about him and that we're responding to who he is. Okay, mission, the last one. As part of Christ Church, we're supposed to be like a city on a hill, right? We're not supposed to be hidden. We're not supposed to be under a bushel. We're supposed to be visible and seen. We should be noticeable, a beacon of light in a dark world, and we're commissioned to share the good news and make disciples. At Youth Unlimited, we use we call it three-story evangelism. We'll listen to their story, what's going on in their life. We'll tell our story, which has some God bits to it, because God's a part of our life, and then we'll try to tell Jesus' story. So it's a way of just kind of bridging that into conversation. We use that method a lot. A lot of our mission happens one-to-one. Like I said, we just take kids out for a coffee or lunch or whatever and sit and talk and maybe read some scripture with them or do whatever. But we also use some small group and large group stuff too when it fits. But what about here? What happens at River of Life as far as mission kind of approaches? Doing something for the community around us. Light up the night. Yep, that's a good one on Halloween. Just caring for the people that come by. That is the Halloween one, right? Yeah. What else? VBS. Yeah. That's open to whoever wants to come. Kids in the community, whoever. It's not just the church families. And that's a way to reach out. share word, right? There's some share word meetings that have happened and trainings, and that can be a useful way. Well, Lily, yeah, working with the family, Lily's family out in wherever it is, Plessy Park, yeah. Caring for families in our community, right? Those are ministry opportunities. Where am I? Oh yeah, Ruth and Naomi's work. Just, as a church, we need to think of how we can have the biggest impact as a body on our community so that people know we care about them. Because most people, you think people walk by a church, and if you're part of a church and you've been a part of a church, it's hard to imagine what they think of what is going on, or if they even do think of it. They might walk by it and totally ignore it. But a lot of people, they maybe have a negative perspective of what goes on in church, and they go, what are they doing? It's kind of weird stuff or whatever. And they don't want anything to do with it. It's only if we as a church can get into the community and actually show them how much we care about them, and that we're concerned about their needs, and that we love them, because Jesus said, love your neighbor as yourself. Like, we're supposed to be out there loving people. That's when people start to go, what is that? Why are those people acting like that? Why are they actually looking after me when they don't even know me? Those are the opportunities that I think are there that we can step into, and we have found some ways. I think there's more ways that we can do it. Okay, what about personally? How do we share our faith in our individual lives? Lunch. Taking time to get to know people and talk to them, right? If we're in too big of a hurry, people talk about being too heavenly minded to be any earthly good. Like, if we're all just so much about, we got to do all this important stuff, but we don't take time to even get to know people around us, that's going to limit our opportunities to minister to others. Right? Living in a proper way. Because if we're we're cutting corners, we're fudging on things, we're lying about something, and then we expect people to trust us and believe us about what we think Christ has done in our life, they're going to go, what? It doesn't work. We got to live it and be able to speak it. Years ago, we had a speaker at our Youth for Christ staff meeting. His name's Carl Medeiros. He's from Colorado, I believe. He did missions work in Lebanon for many years and trained for it, he and his wife. And for years, they had nobody listen to them, no converts, nothing. And he was so frustrated, going, what is going on? I'm doing all the stuff they taught me, all these formulas and all these methods, and nothing seems to work. And he said he was driven back to the New Testament, and he just started reading the Gospels. And he read them over and over and over. And he said, whatever Jesus was and taught is what I need to be able to communicate. And he got it to where the stories of Jesus were just so close to everything his thinking. And then he just went out, and people would tell them a story or something, and he would go, that reminds me of something that happened with Jesus. And he would tell it, and they go, what? We didn't know. And within months, he had hundreds of converts. And all it was is that he had just figured out, I got to tell people about Jesus. I don't have to do tricks and little sneaky things. I just got to let them know who Jesus was and how much he appreciates them. He wrote a book called Speaking of Jesus. It's an excellent read, and it just kind of helps us think that there's ways to do this in a real kind of simple way and not drag it out. Okay, we made it through 6 points. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you, but I want to go back to two verses that we read earlier, because they just caught me in a different way as I read through this. The first is in Acts 2:43. It says, everyone was filled with awe at the many wonders and signs performed by the apostles. And the last is right at the end of the passage, Acts 2:47. Praising God and enjoying the favor of the people were doing that, and the Lord added daily to their number those who were being saved. Both of those verses kind of caught my attention, because the people outside the church were looking at the church with favor. Right? Sometimes people think, oh, that church is horrible. They were doing stuff that made such a difference that the world, the people outside, going, what are they doing? That's crazy. They were in awe of the church. I think that's That's where we need to get to. And I know that's, that's hard to sort of just arrive there. But boy, we got to keep working at that, finding ways for the community to be in awe of us as followers of Jesus, and go, whatever they got, I want that, because it's changed them, it's changing our world, it's changing even our communities. And I think we can do that. And I think we're already doing some good things that are Christ-like and that are like the early church did. But the more we can do that, the better we can reach out to the community. And as we teach, fellowship, eat, pray, share, worship, and live missionally together, we can be a light in this community and a support to people that are in need. So I've said enough. We're going to get the worship team to come back up. Thank you for listening and for hearing stuff. I'm happy to chat some more about what we do, and hopefully Ken will be around to talk after and check the truck out. And I'm done.